Today we're going to fit this cooler into this 16-liter case. Big cooler, tiny, or sort of tiny case. Welcome to Machines and More. The Sliger S620 is one of my personal favorites. You got big air in a little case, actually huge air cooling when it comes to this guy, the Be Quiet Dark Rock Pro 5, which we reviewed recently. So today I'll walk you through the build. It's actually quite simple, but I did want to revisit some of the features, the aspects of this case, as well as the build components. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is the Sliger S620. That's a case that probably the most unique thing is the amount of air cooler clearance that we have. We can fit the cooler that we're going to be using, the Dark Rock Pro 5, Silent Wings Pro 4 fans from Be Quiet, high performance fan here. And this front one is intaking, this one is exhausting. It's a little bit odd that they're so close together and they're running in opposite directions, but the intent here is this is going to feed the cooler for the CPU, and this is going to help exhaust some of the GPU's waste heat when it comes out the side. And since the bottom, the GPU is always going to be intaking at the bottom when it's air cooled, you don't want to put too many intakes here to fight that. One of the nice things about these fans is the generously long cable, and this will enable us to run it all the way, snake it down between here, the two fans through the bottom, and then onto a splitter to connect to the motherboard. Got all our I/O cables. We're going to route it with a zip tie close to the bottom here. Motherboard that I'm using for this build is one of the best mini-itx boards in recent memory. There aren't too many that are this good. This is the MSI Z690. This is an MEG, so it's part of their enthusiast gaming lineup. It's pretty similar to the MPG Z790 ITX board, but I think this one, it fits a little bit better with this theme because it's dark and it's pretty sleek looking. One thing I noticed is when you run the M.2 here, hopefully you can see this, the rubber pad does not contact this, so when the heatsink goes over it, it's just going to kind of it's not going to make good contact with the chips up here. So what I'm going to do is stick a little thermal pad under the rubber part just to raise up the drive, or just to contact a little bit, and then that'll kind of ensure that the contact with the top heatsink is good. Okay, so you can see the contact with the thermal pad under the heatsink. It's a lot better with that little addition there. So sometimes they come with little rubber pads. I didn't see one with this kit. The CPU here is the 12700K. I took this one out of the formed T1 custom loop, the T1 V2 build that I did, the sandwich version, and basically we'll switch to air cooled for this CPU because the Dark Rock Pro 5, it tested out so well. So I'm really curious to see how this little beast will do with that. I've got the cooler hardware mounted up. This is Corsair's Vengeance DDR5. So one thing I should mention about this case is that you can run the power supply two ways. I've got it set up to run sideways like this. That's the only way you can have the front fan. Now, it's a little bit odd because it does impede the front fan by quite a bit. But if you put it flat on the side like this, it actually will not. You can't install the case fan here. So it's kind of a little bit better to put it sideways there. So I'll slot that in. This is the SP850. I took this one out of the T1 V2 build, and we'll just run it in here. Should be more than enough power. The 850 watt unit. This does have a fanless mode, which may not always be a good thing. When it does end up ramping up, it does tend to spike a little bit, which is a little annoying, but at the end of the day, with the 6800 XT and the 12700K, actually this fan does not come on very often. Alright, power supply is secured in place. I'm going to straighten out some of the cables just to get an idea before I connect it up. Okay. let's just pop the motherboard in. So I've got the EPS cable, connected that beforehand. That's gonna snake up here, and we'll try to tuck that away. The 24-pin cable here. So one thing about this motherboard is that the case fan header, it's in a really terrible location. It's actually gonna change course on that, and I'm just gonna run a splitter cable from the pump fan header at the top. That is a pretty tight location, and also it won't, it's never gonna sit nicely, or it's never gonna look good when I have the card there. So we'll just run both of these together. Hide these behind the EPS cable here. That'll kind of keep it pressed down there too. Alright, so we've got the power supply in. The cables are mostly organized. Fans are hooked up. Everything's hooked up except for the graphics card. So I'm actually gonna put the graphics card in first because the cooler, it's so bulky, such a huge cooler, that we're gonna put that in at the very end. So kind of a bigger card here. This is the Gigabyte Gaming OC 6800 XT. Okay, one of the tricky things about this case is that when you mount the card in, the power plug has to come off, because this plate here would block the GPU from slotting in. So we do need to kind of work that in this way. Which there's plenty of room in this case. This card, it's a pretty big card, but it should have no problem fitting. All right, so cards in place. Just screw that down here. One thing I've always found a little bit strange about this case is just the location of the power plug, and it runs in front here. Not the most elegant, but it'll work. I'll just connect all the cables, and it actually is going to slot over here quite nicely out of the way, so we shouldn't have too much to tuck away here. All right, I've got the cooler here ready to install. It's a very big cooler, so we do want to make sure that it's the last thing to go in. Here. Just connect this guy here, just on position. We do want to make sure that this fan will spin freely, which it's not, right? So we got to make sure these cables are out of the way and don't impede. So now that's a little bit better. So do that. In a mini-itx build, this is always going to be of some concern just because of how close that 24-pin port is to this fan here. Okay, so something interesting. There's still space to run a fan here. It's about 28-ish millimeters here to the back panel. And let's see, height-wise. Oh gosh. Should we do it? Yeah, let's do it. Let's go 3 fans. Yeah? 1, 2, and then we'll triple it up with the same. Now the tricky thing is, this is a Silent Wings, like a custom fan speed one. This is goes up to 2,000 RPM. The regular Silent Wings non-pro, those don't have the same interval, so I am a little concerned, especially since how close it is to here. And then if we run the Pro, the fan speed, even if we use the toggle, it's not going to line up to the 2000 RPM. I'm going to put a Chromax NFA 12x25 there, because that goes up to 2000 RPM. It's not going to be exactly the same airflow, but I think it's going to be a little bit better Alright, so I did put the Nocta fan back here. Didn't tighten it down yet because I want to line it up perfectly with the cooler. I'm going to put a splitter cable here. Okay, so this is like a match made in heaven. You know, the cooler lines up with the back panel fan almost perfectly, and we'll put this on the same header. That's why I'm using the splitter cable here. So I tighten the cooler back down. Essentially, there's 3 cooler fans here. I do have this splitter cable here at the back, so it's actually really it's gonna be way easier to connect everything up. Okay, is looking pretty good. All right, crazy times. We got a NFA 12 by 25 here, 2000 RPM. The middle 135 millimeter stock cooler fan, and this one here. So you can probably see why I wanted to do this last, because it would have been hard to line up the card with this obstruction here. But with the acrylic panel, which I kind of want it this way because I want to be able to see it. I just think it's there's so much going on here, so that we want to see it, right? So just be aware. It kind of, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm not gonna say it's perfect, but you know, it touches, but it's okay. All right, so I'm just gonna put the top panel and whatnots back on the bottom. Okay, so here it is. I did put the system through its paces already, and I did limit that fan curve to a max of 70%. This is a noise optimized build here, so silence is the priority. And that fan curve governs the 2 CPU cooler fans, as well as the Noctua NFA 12 by 25 fan, which is technically attached to the case, is basically a third cooler fan, as it is practically right up against the cooler, right? That the way this lines up is uncanny. You really could not ask for a better fit here between the Dark Rock Pro 5 and this rear 120mm fan in this case. So performance is good despite being limited to only that 70%, which is really quiet. So let's cut over to the audio sample and I'll show you. Cooler fans at about 50% PWM here. I'm gonna start the CPU render just to show you the loud. I've capped it at 70%, so it actually will not ramp up too much, and it's able to keep the CPU from throttling decent boost clocks as well. So it does ramp up to that 70% level. This is where I've capped it at. And despite that, it can still run at a fairly comfortable temperature here. Still get the boost clocks. Since we are kind of basing this around this cooler, the CPU thermals are central to this discussion here, because using this huge air cooler that is as good or better than your best 240mm AIOs, this should be special, right? And at the 12700K, it's pulling 193, 194 watts here, and the temps are still okay despite this being a noise optimized setting. I think with this level of power draw and that noise level, it's really impressive. 1440p gaming, absolutely no issues. The CPU temps are fine, high 50s, low 60s. This type of cooler setup, the rear exhausting, it's going to make the CPU temps a little bit hotter at the benefit of your GPU, which is gonna take away some of the hotter exhaust. So, mostly 4.7 gigahertz for your single core boost. CPU fans are only at about 50% PWM here, so it's really not adding too much noise to the mix. We're talking about 1000 RPM on all these fans. The GPU, it's really going to vary by what card, how much power you have that you decide to pair with that cooler. Here, the 6800 XT, it's staying at about 76, 77 degrees, running Heaven 4.0 here. The fans are boosting up to about 68% PWM, and that's about 2100 RPM for the GPU fans. You can definitely hear that coil whine. It's a little bit more annoying with kind of your modern cards, some of them anyway. So mainly the sound you will hear during gaming, it's going to be your GPU cooler, or the cooler fans. So Sliger S620, still a super legit case here. The Dark Rock Pro 5, it is on the bigger side for an air cooler, and it's spec'd at 165 millimeters, but it still manages to fit in here. Now, this cooler and the Elite, they didn't actually measure it in as tall as they were spec'd to be, so that helps somewhat, but still in a 16-liter case, this is a lot of air cooler, and that is a huge amount of air cooling in a case this small. The cooler does make contact with the acrylic panel, but it's really no biggie. This build here is a quick build to throw together, the cable management being the bigger part of the thought process. Now, one thing I'd change, if this were a longer term build, I'd definitely mask off the side of the power supply. The labeling is just, it's not terrible. It's not super streamlined. It could be a little bit less busy, and but pretty good build. Performs well if you are looking to do a big air SFF. Really highly recommend this case still, and also this cooler combo. Now, one thing, I do have this I'm testing. This is Deepcool AK620. So it seems like a pretty neat cooler so far, so look for that content soon in this case. I'll leave the components link down below. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Please give a like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.